This is Kilo, and I just wanted to address a question that comes up pretty frequently now since I've made the channel about my opinion as a locksmith, my opinion of Locksport. I've seen this question come up in social media groups. I get this message to me privately on the channel. I see comments about it, and I know that there is some rivalry between the two sides. I've followed the Locksport community for a while now, and as a locksmith, I feel this tension, especially when I post or I, you know, try and offer help to somebody in the Locksport community. Especially even recently, I tried to offer some help to someone who was new to the hobby. They introduced themselves as new to the hobby, been doing it for a few months, and they were having trouble picking a master lock. And I kind of gave them some pointers on tension, and they actually responded to me, you're just a locksmith. What do you know about picking locks? All you do is, drill and cut locks, don't you? And that was kind of funny. I didn't react angry or anything. Like, just because I know I followed the community so long, I know that locksmiths aren't seen as, I guess, respected, or I guess is a word I could use. And I've also seen it on the other side, where I've seen, a locksmith go in there and act super cocky and, basically let their ego talk. So I'm just going to kind of touch on how I feel about this rivalry and how I feel about both the trade and the hobby. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. I just wanted to kind of say that piece before we jump in to show you guys where I'm at. I don't feel any ill will towards either side. I just want to address for you guys, because I know, I don't want to ignore this question and make anybody feel ignored. I'm not going to shy away from any of the questions you guys have. I want to address it just to get this one out of the way. So we're going to go ahead and just start off locksmith versus locksport. The way that you have to look at this is actually trade versus hobby. So to give you guys an idea here, one is what somebody does to provide for their family. This is what they rely on for their paycheck. This is something somebody does on their day off or their time off for fun. So where I see the tension come in is when I've seen locksmiths who they will see somebody in the hobby come across and pick a lock that they themselves couldn't pick, and they kind of find offense to it for some reason. A lot of that is ego. Most of it is going to be ego. They don't like seeing the fact that somebody can learn a trade that they spent years, learning, figure it out very quickly in a matter of, weeks. And there's kind of a hostility. And then there's also the side of the hobbyist who maybe works, part-time somewhere and does this for the bulk of, their time off. And they have a lot of time on their hands to just focus on picking. And they think that, I've even had the question, from some viewers, some people in the groups and forums, they've asked, in the hobby, since I can pick, medicos and abloys and this and that, how do you think I would fare working at a lock shop? You think I would get promoted really quick? And those are questions that I've received and I've heard. And you got to understand that lock picking in the trade is not a popular job. It's not a popular task you're gonna have to deal with every day. And to really put this into perspective, if we eliminate locks and locksport and locksmithing and everything, and we change this, let's pretend we're something else, like a bartender. Let's pretend that, you know, you are a bartender for your trade, and this is what you do for a living. And for 8 to 10 hours or whatever the shift is, this is what you do. You perfected your craft. You've trained for years to be able to, juggle these bottles and spit flames and, layer these drinks and multiple drinks at once and all kinds of tricks and flair and anything. And you've spent years trying to perfect your skill set. And then you have a guy who works at, a supermarket, and on his time off and his days off, he spends his extra money on, his own little bar at home, and he just goes on YouTube and watches certain skills and just perfects them over and over and over and over because he has that kind of time. You don't have that kind of time, and it took you years because you have a whole, bigger picture to worry about. You have to worry about making sure the drinks are perfect. You want to make sure that you're not wasting anything. You're not really able to do this. Your practice comes on the job. This guy is using his extra money to be able to perfect this. You don't really have that option. And when you watch somebody, come in who's watched a video and they can do one trick and they just show that trick over and over and over to try and show you up, it can make you angry. It's also in the same realm here. If this is what you've done for a living, 8 to 10 hours a day for years, and you go home, the last thing that you want to think about is drinks or the bar or anything to do with that trade. This guy, that's all he wants to think about on his time off because he doesn't want to think about his own job. Like whatever you do for a living, you normally don't want to take that home with you and deal with it. So there is kind of this area here that these two can butt heads here. And, back to locksmithing, when a guy is providing for his family and doing this as a job, and he watches somebody who watched some YouTube videos learn how to pick, and then come into his shop and say, I could pick this, I could pick that, I'm faster than you, if you hired me, I can pick everything there is, he's gonna kind of look at you like, what? Like, you're gonna have this animosity there right off the bat. And again, that goes back to ego on both sides. That is something to think about. The same way if you worked at a fast food joint, if you, fried burgers and dipped fries in grease all day, you wouldn't want to come home and flip burgers and dunk fries in grease all day. Like, you'd say, I want to do anything but do that. I don't even want to smell fast food. I don't even want to eat. I just want to come home and do anything but eat, Like, you have to think of it from that perspective versus if, you might be a doctor or a lawyer or a police officer, gas station attendant, anything. It's different to, find a hobby than it is to come home from your trade and be interested in your trade as a hobby. I am kind of an anomaly in that. I'm probably the only locksmith I know in my area that brings his work home with him. I actually thoroughly enjoy locks and keys, which is why I got into the trade. A lot of guys who got into locksmithing jumped into it from being mechanics, other aspects of the construction trade. I worked with a guy who passed the bar exam, and he was practicing law, and then he got hired. He was some type of lawyer, and he said he hated it. He's like, I didn't like the atmosphere, I didn't like the people, I didn't like anything about it. And he joined, and he got hired, and he wanted to learn how to be a locksmith. So there's a lot of people who come into this from different worlds, and it was never a hobby. They just kind of fell into it. And if they do that, if they do this all day long, they're not going to want to go home and just practice it as a hobby. They might do it for their first few months to get practice, but once they're seasoned in the trade, they don't really do it anymore. So you guys do have to understand where a locksmith is coming from when it comes to the hobby. Another question kind of goes back to the comments that I get when I try to help. You know, if I offer some help as a locksmith and I get the reaction, what do you know about picking locks? You're a locksmith. Don't you just drill and cut off every lock you come across? It's pretty offensive to come at a locksmith that way. I get, the rivalry part, and I'm always, for a good rivalry and whatever it is. It is a sport. So you guys have to understand something here. When a locksmith goes to a lockout, he has to understand and keep in mind a big picture. If you are, like, let's say you're in Locksport and your buddy says, hey, I locked myself out of my house, and you're like, yeah, I'll come over there and pick it right now, and you walk over there and you single pin pick it to show off to him. That's all you're gonna do, and you're like, I'm accomplished. For a locksmith, when you show up to a home, it's more than just picking the lock. You have to understand that at the end of the job, you're going to make a key for this person. And in almost all cases here, not all, but in the majority of them, you basically are getting into this lock and you're probably going to end up rekeying the house. So you have to understand, like, do I really want to take all of my time to single pin pick this lock just to get in and then rekey 15 locks? I was recently just at a job where I had to rekey 18 locks on a home. It was a massive house, and if I really wanted to sit there and pick every single one of those, I would have been there all day. Some of them were smart locks, and even though I do have bypass methods, that's still a long way to do it. I did end up getting into the house without drilling or cutting anything off, but in some cases there are locksmiths that just, because of the mindset of I don't really need to pick, because I've been to clients before where they've had high security locks and they're like, I don't care if you take a blowtorch and a drill and a grinder to it, I have a new lock, so however you want to get in, get in. So to some locksmiths, they're going to hear that and say, okay, I got it. And you have to understand that this is for multiple reasons. Just like I said, they have more locks that they're going to have to worry about. So they're going to be more focused on learning to shim, like I touched on in one of my videos. I'll leave a link right here on shimming. That's more important to locksmithing than picking. You're not going to sit there and try to pick over every lock. You're going to, pick the first one, get in, and shim the rest. There's also the fact that you're going to, as a locksmith, they're going to have, that's not their only job for the day. So, you might have a call come in and say, hey, there's a master lock on a gate that, we need you to go cut off. You're going to go out there and be like, okay, I'll go cut this lock off. And hobbyists are going to see that and be like, oh, look at this locksmith, grinding off this master lock. The thing is, you don't know how long that master lock's been on that gate. It could have been there for 40 years. It's not the same as going to a hardware store, purchasing a lock out of the package and picking it. It's really easy to do that. It's more impressive when you can pick one that's been sitting out in the elements for decades. They also have to think, how long has it been on there? How many times have people used WD-40 on that thing and gunked it up? How many people have tried to pick it themselves? How many people have twisted this thing? You have to think about that before you even go to the call. There's a lot of aspects of this that you have to really have in mind as a locksmith. So, cutting off a padlock is usually quicker, so you can get to the next, 6 or 7 jobs on your schedule to keep on time. So that's just to address anyone who wonders why sometimes locksmiths do it. A lot of times you'll see fly-by-night guys drill locks, and it's terrible when it's, on an easy quick set or something. You can tell it's a scam. Not all locksmiths drill locks. I haven't, drilled a lock to get into one. Not all of us have to do that. Some of them do, but a lot of times it's all based on skill, the same way that in Locksport, 2 guys that join Locksport hobbies, at the same time, 2 years later, one guy's here and the other guy's still kind of here. Nobody progresses at the same rate. So to address that, another big rule in locksmithing is never pick a lock you are not paid to pick. So again, goes back to in the trade, when you go home, you're not going to sit there and pick a bunch of locks. It's like, why would I do that? I'm not getting paid. I would rather, focus on learning how to open a safe than learn how to, pick a master lock or a quickset or a Schlage or whatever it is. When we have so many bypass methods, we have so many tools at our disposal. We don't really need to know how to pick all of these locks because we have tools that kind of do it for us now. So there's that reason. Mostly it's just if there's no really gain other than just self-accomplishment, you're not going to find a lot of locksmiths that want to do it. It's the same way that a guy who juggles for a living probably doesn't go home and say, watch this, I'm going to juggle alone in my living room and have this sense of accomplishment. They're going to say, no, I'll wait until someone pays me to do it. It's kind of like that. Another reason some locksmiths have a problem with Locksport is because they tie it into, and this is important to really note. Not everybody in Locksport does this, but what happens is the locksmiths see Locksport and these kind of scammers as one in a lot of instances, which they shouldn't, but a lot of the older generation doesn't understand the difference. What happens is people will come across YouTube videos, such as my channel. They'll learn how to do some simple jobs, and they'll try it themselves, and they'll say, I could start my own business. Like after a month of just watching a whole bunch of videos. And some guys in Locksport I've even gotten messages, on how they could start up their own business and whatnot, just doing lockouts. I've seen this happen in metro areas where guys are good pickers, and they've come in and they've even asked our shop, do we have any pointers on how they can get started? And our owners at those shops usually didn't like those guys to begin with, and we would end up getting calls because those guys would start up. I wrote fly by night because that's what they're kind of referred to in the locksmith world. Is they'll learn these, they'll watch these videos, they'll learn enough to pick a lock or get in, and what happens is they're not locksmiths, and locksmiths see these guys as basically trying to be locksmiths. You're going to start up as, I'm just a lockout guy, but technically you're a locksmith. To get that, you have to apply for a locksmith license, so now you are direct competition. I've got to a lot of calls in metro areas where there were some guys who they know how to pick locks, and that's all they could do. And they show up, they pick a lock, and then the customer's like, okay, I need a key, and they're like, well, I don't do that, I just pick locks. Like, you got to think about that. I actually have shown up to clients who were like, I hired this guy, he was $40 to come pick the lock, but that's all he could do. He couldn't make me a lock or a key. He didn't have any locks with him. If I wanted locks, he said that I'd have to pay more so he could run to Home Depot and grab them. And that those kind of guys, that's what locksmiths see, and they kind of lump them in with the guys going on YouTube learning the skills. You gotta understand, some of the older generation isn't really privy to the YouTube generation and the internet generation, and they don't understand. There are some people that just do this for fun, and they can take offense really quickly, as this is what locksmiths do deal with all the time, is guys coming in kind of like imposters, pretending to be something that they themselves have been practicing for many years and decades. So that's one side that I just wanted to show you guys. And at the end, it all comes down to ego on both sides. There are Locksport guys who hate locksmiths. There are locksmiths who hate the hobby. There are locksmiths who have ego towards other locksmiths, and there are hobbyists who have ego towards other hobbyists. Ego is huge, and ego is the main thing that I see personally, from the outside looking in here and the inside looking out. That's all I see. I've worked with locksmiths who they would take offense to the fact that I was faster at impressioning a key than them. I had locksmiths who were angry that I could pick locks faster than them. They were mad that I just had a quicker pace than they did, and that I could catch on so fast when they taught me. I kind of progressed really quickly, and they took offense to it. I've worked with guys who were younger than me who, I'd come in from a job and they're like, how'd you handle it? And I'm like, oh, I had this, it was a pretty tough job. And, the younger guy looks at me and he's like, oh, that's easy. I do those all day. It's cake, blah, blah. You get that attitude. You get the guy who's like, you'll ask him what he does for a living, or like how he got into locksmithing. And he's like, oh, it was my calling. Since I was, 2 years old, I was always fascinated with locks, and I pick up locks and pick them. And it's like, no, you didn't. Like, no, like, just stop lying to me. Just, who inspired you to do this? Like, don't go on these little stories and these rants. Just stop it, And then you have, the hobbyists who I've even had some message me on the channel, and they're like, I don't think that you really know what you're talking about. And I don't understand why they would message me that. All I'm trying to do is help with this channel. That's the whole purpose of it. But I do get those guys who, they'll tell me, I've been in Locksport for this many years and I think I know more than you. And, if I went to a lockout with you, I would beat your time. And it's like, that's ego, It's like, that'd be cool if you did it. But if me and you went to, a master key job, I'm pretty sure I would knock it out the park while you're sitting there still master keying up your first cylinder. If we went to go install, panic bars, I'm pretty sure I would knock out more doors than you. If we went to, a safe job, I'm pretty sure I would knock that out quicker. I could do all that, but I don't want to come across as also being, having this massive ego. I'm here to really say, let me help you. Let me bounce this off you, and you can bounce something off of me, and we can learn together. That's where I kind of come at this like that. There are hobbyists that I've seen angry that other hobbyists are doing something a certain way. It all comes down to ego. So I really didn't want to touch on this subject, but it is something that is asked of me a lot lately, in forums and groups. I have private messages with a lot of you guys, and this has come up over a dozen times in the last 2 weeks. So I didn't want you guys to just think I'm ignoring that question altogether. I wanted to kind of face this head on, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time. I know that this video is going into over 20 minutes now, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I just want you guys to understand, as a locksmith, I do appreciate locksmithing, Locksport, anything to do with locks and keys. I do not, see anybody else's competition. I don't want to copy anybody. I don't want to, because I know something, I don't want to say I'm better than you. If I offer you help, it's genuinely to help you. And if you already know the information that I give you, you don't have to respond angrily or, aggressively. You could just say, okay, I know that. What else do you think it could be? You don't have to say you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a locksmith. Approaching it that way. And from the locksmith side, some of the locksmiths that I've seen, they can learn the same thing. That, don't assume that everybody's on the same level, and don't assume that everybody, that nobody knows anything. That's what locksmiths do to other locksmiths too. You'll show up and they're like, they'll talk to you about really easy rekeys, like you don't know what it is, like it's rocket science, and it can get annoying, and it all comes down to ego. So I just wanted to respond to your guys' messages about that, end it here on this 24-minute mark, and I do appreciate all of the subscribers. We're heading into our giveaway on Friday. We're over 110 subscribers now, so that's just incredible. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys, the feedback, the thumbs ups, the thumbs downs, the constructive criticism, all of it. Thank you guys. If there's comments or messages that I haven't gotten to, I'm starting to get more and more messages, and I'm getting to them, so apologies if I haven't got to you yet. But thank you guys. Again, I just wanted to address this so that way you guys can can really see where a locksmith's coming from, my own idea on this, and I'm never going to touch on this subject again. So this is one and done, but thank you guys, appreciate it. If you liked the video and you haven't subscribed, you can go ahead and subscribe if you'd like to see more locksmith, lock picking videos, how-to videos. And that's really all there is to this one. So, stay safe out there. Try to, everybody just try to get along and have a nice day.